Get ready for a big video. Now you're probably gonna think, oh wow, this video is really long. But I like it. In the last two videos, we talked about how melodies move up, down, or stay the same, and how virtually all melodies fit into this grid, aka boxes 0 through 12. The purpose of this grid is to help us place musical tones, aka points or dots, and uncover the relationships between them, aka lines or change in direction. When we can place musical tones and understand the relationships between them, we can see melody clearer than ever before. Now that we know how melodies move and have an idea of how melodies can be described on the grid, we have one more piece of background information that can help us crack the code of melody. In this video, we'll explain the Codebreaker, also known as the major scale, which will tell us more about exactly how melodies move. If you've ever experienced difficulty working with melody, or if you're simply looking for some clarification on it for your own music making, this is vital information. Now let's say for a given melody like Twinkle, twinkle, little star, we are tasked with figuring it out. In other words, placing it on the grid. If we had a completely blank grid, how would we go about doing this? Let's say we already know that the first note of the melody of this song starts on a low note relative to the other notes to come. So we've been given information that places the first note of the song right here. And let's say, because we are already familiar with the first two notes of the melody, that we know they stay the same, twinkle. But at this point in the melody, it jumps up. We know this because the sound of the melody is higher now that we've reached the third note of the song. Twinkle, twinkle. How far does it jump? Could you tell me exactly how many boxes are in between those two notes? In which box does the third note of the melody land? Can you do it without your instrument? Now we've talked about the random trial and error method of guessing with your instrument and how ineffective it is. And we know we must involve our ear in the process to gain a first-hand experience of melody. But how do we tell where in this grid the melody goes? How can we discern the exact distance of the jump? And in general, how do we approach other melodies, especially the difficult ones? You might ask, isn't it just easier to do the random trial and error guess and check, Warren? Well, in some cases, the answer is absolutely yes. But the truth is this, randomly guessing is by definition random. And perhaps more importantly, you'll soon discover that as melodies get more complicated and challenging, this approach breaks down. We have a way to be done with guessing forever. Let that sink in for a moment. If you develop your ear and combine it with a little bit of music theory, you can be certain of how melodies move. You can intimately know the melodies you love on a whole new level. Now, more experienced students will know how exactly twinkle, twinkle lands. But for the rest of us, there is a tool that will make placement of a melody a whole lot easier. This is where the major scale comes in. Now, a quick definition. The major scale is a familiar set of notes ordered by pitch from low to high.
Here you are, sir.
Thank you. The familiar sound that we get from this set of notes shows up again and again in countless popular melodies. And knowing how the major scale works will give us these boxes in which the countless melodies in popular music get placed. The majority of the time, popular melodies are constructed using the major scale. I think that's why they call it that. I don't know. I don't really know for sure. Additionally, if the major scale is what most popular melodies use, and we know exactly where those boxes of the major scale are, then The major scale, by logical conclusion, also tells us which boxes will not show up in most melodies. We will see notes in these boxes less often. Understanding the major scale, therefore, simplifies the entire process of approaching melody by encouraging our ears towards the notes that are more likely to appear in popular music, and also by exclusion, leaving out the notes that are less likely to appear. Understanding the major scale also gives us a baseline with which we can use to appreciate different scales, like the minor scale, or church modes, or the blues scale, or altered scales, or even scales found in so-called world music, etc. Therefore, the major scale can be our ultimate guide into melodies, all the melodies that have ever been constructed, and even the ones that have yet to be conceived. Now, it can't be overemphasized how important the major scale is when it comes to understanding melody. A close parallel would be like someone learning what to call the basic flavors for the first time. Sour, salty, sweet, bitter, and umami. If you don't know what umami is, you should look it up. It's awesome. So the major scale, after our lengthy and hopefully insightful exposition here, is a series of musical tones ordered from low to high by these relationships. Whole, whole, half. Whole, 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 half. Also known as tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. As you can see, this is already simpler than in the previous video where we had all 13 boxes. I had already sung, "These are all the different tones the boxes represent." But now we only have these 8 different tones. These tones together sound completely different now that we have removed the tones in between, and that's entirely due to the relationships between them. Before, we were hearing 12 half steps or semitones in succession. But now we're hearing whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. These whole and half step relationships are what really define the major scale and give it its distinctive sound. Say it with me. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Memorize it. Make a bookmark for it. Repeat it before bed. Just hammer it into your mind. And alongside, get to know the scale degrees as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Get familiar with those sounds and the relationships between them. Got it? Good. Now you've heard me say that word a few times now. Relationship. It's all about relationships. Melody is concerned with relationships kind of in a horizontal manner over time from one note to the next. As we move into harmony, which are more often vertical relationships between multiple notes occurring simultaneously, and rhythm, which are events that occur over time and how they relate to each other in terms of time. This concept of relationships will permeate all that we talk about in this foundation stage of videos. If we didn't look at these notes by their tonal relationships to each other, all we would have is a collection of particular notes. You might have a C here or a G there. And how many of us could identify those notes by name just from hearing those sounds? I personally can't. The ability to do so is known as absolute pitch, also called perfect pitch. I don't have perfect pitch. But now that we see the major scale not as a collection of absolute pitches, but as a group of notes ordered by relationship, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, you won't need perfect pitch to work out a melody either. What we're talking about is relative pitch, the ability to identify a tone by its relationship to other tones. When I asked you, how far does twinkle, twinkle jump, it was a relative pitch question. And your ability to answer that relative pitch question and the ability to gauge the jump between any two notes and place the note you're looking for in the grid is not going to come from some magical ability out of reach for the average student of music, but from familiarity with the major scale and the relationships within it. Twinkle, twinkle is no longer just an abstract, unidentifiable sound, but translated, it becomes 1, 1, 5, 5. Clear, identifiable, manageable scale degrees. When you become familiar with the relationships of the major scale between scale degrees 1 through 8, you will not only be able to identify this one melodic jump, but every melodic step, skip, jump, turn, or slide ever sung or played. In other words, relative pitch introduced via the major scale is the skill that will allow you to place musical tones based on the relationship to the tones before or after them. Again, I do not have perfect pitch, but I do have relative pitch, and I've honed that over the years by working out my ear, training it. My YouTube videos are evidence of this. Melodies, harmonies, and rhythms of new songs with covers and tutorials created by me and uploaded within a few days of a song's initial debut. And so, relative pitch is what you want. And familiarity between the scale degrees 1 and 8 via the major scale is what we'll be seeking out, video by video, exercise by exercise, until the goal of ear training becomes crystal clear. The implications of the major scale and the relationships between these scale degrees is huge. Can you successfully translate the rest of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star into scale degrees? How sure are you about your answers? How far do you get before you become stuck? Can you do it with a different melody you're familiar with? For more experienced students, how about a more challenging melody you know? Take some time, answer honestly, and join me in the next video where we'll dive into the subject of ear training.